Before we begin, a quick note that this episode includes discussion on drug use and the death of a teenager. Some listeners may find this upsetting, so please take care. Welcome to the Brilliant Humans podcast, where we celebrate extraordinary people. But here's the catch. No one is talking about themselves. Every guest is here to share the story of a brilliant human who shaped them, inspired them, or changed their life forever. They might be famous or completely unknown, alive or no longer with us. A teacher, a parent, a stranger, a leader, a friend. These are real stories, honestly told. Stories of kindness, creativity, courage and connection, because brilliance deserves to be shared. This is the Brilliant Humans podcast. Welcome to the show. On this episode of the Brilliant Humans podcast, I'm joined by Fiona Spargo-Mabbs, director and founder of the drug education charity, the Daniel Spargo-Mabbs Foundation. Fiona is also the chair of the Drug Education Forum and a member of the government's Advisory Council on the Misuse of Drugs, and has spent much of her career working in education and supporting vulnerable families. In 2014, Fiona founded the DSM Foundation following the death of her 16-year-old son, Dan, and since then has worked tirelessly to educate, support, and influence change at a national level. Alongside her frontline work, Fiona is an award-winning author and in 2023 was awarded an OBE for services to young people. Outside of work, she enjoys running, reading, baking and charity shopping, and for many years even kept chickens in her back garden in Croydon. Today, Fiona is here to talk about a brilliant human who has had the biggest influence on her life. I'm really grateful she's joining us, so welcome, Fiona.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for inviting me onto your show.
Oh, well, thank you so much for giving up your time to be here. Look, let's start with the OBE. I mean, what an incredible honour.
I mean, as I'm sure you can imagine, and I'm sure it's the same for many people, it was very, very bittersweet. You know, it was, I mean, such an enormous honour, and of all the things to get an OBE for me, to get it for services to young people was that's what I am all about now. That's, you know, that's the focus of my life. But I wouldn't have got it if Dan hadn't died. So I would have traded it in a heartbeat. But what an enormous honour, and also such a gift for the foundation, because it sort of validates the value of what we do.
Am I right in thinking that have you always been involved in education and young people, Fiona?
Well, always in education, but I worked in adult education. So that's working with parents who've got limited skills themselves in, for me, reading, writing, speaking, listening. If your primary carer struggles with reading or struggles to articulate how they want to say something as well as they might, then there are lots of things that are statistically harder. If your reading, writing, speaking, listening are limited, then you stop being able to access the curriculum at school at quite a young age. So some might stop going, some might act up, some might shut down, or just kind of slide out of visibility. But it means that school isn't, and education isn't a place where people have experienced anything other than failure. But everyone has enormous potential, and everybody wants the best for their children, don't they? And so enabling parents to be that and do that for their children when they've had so many challenges in their own lives, I absolutely loved it.
So you've always been involved in learning and education.
Mm.
And then obviously your life took a turn unexpectedly, awfully. And then that took you in a different direction in terms of education. So for people listening and want to know about the foundation before we get into the story, because I think it's important context, just tell us a bit about what happened and how you ended up where you are today.
Sure. So we had two boys. We had Jacob and Dan. So Jacob's a couple of years older than Dan. Dan was our youngest son. And Dan was one of those people, genuinely everyone loved Dan. I mean, I obviously, I'm horribly biased. I'm his mum. Both of my boys are amazing. But Dan was he was prom king after GCSEs. You know, he was everyone voted for their favourite boy, and that was Dan. And he just had a wicked sense of humor. He had an outrageous approach to life, and was also very incredibly kind and big-hearted and generous, and had an enormous conscience with regard to what was fair and what was right, and things would trouble him if he felt that someone wasn't being fairly treated, or so he had a lot to give to the world, and unfortunately when he was 16, I thought he was going to a party not far from home with some friends, but actually it was an illegal rave, miles away from us, and mostly friends of a new friend, who joined the school for sixth form, and a bunch of them were taking MDMA, or ecstasy, and unfortunately Dan was one of them, and unfortunately he got a little bag that was just incredibly strong, and he massively overheated, and he was rushed off to hospital. So we had a couple of days in intensive care with Dan on life support, because everything just shut down. Everything just stopped working, and they worked incredibly hard to try and keep him alive, but it was just too much. And he died on Monday, the 20th of January.
I mean, look, honestly, it sends shivers down my spine. I was one of the kids when I was at secondary school who I was educated through the Leah Betts story.
Yes, right, yeah.
And, that scared me. That scared me so much. But, I know a lot of people that have gone on to take MDMA and other drugs. And, it's one of, I think the thing about the Leah Betts thing, and I think the thing about the Daniel thing that I've thought of ever since I saw you speaking, was you just don't know. It might be that 50 of you, 50 of you could take it and be fine, and it only needs that one bag or that one pill. And that's what I think scared me so much.
I'd had exactly that conversation, including about Leah Betts, 6 months before Dan died, because he'd been off to Reading Festival, saved up his paper round money, gone to Reading Festival with his friends, as you do your GCSEs, head straight off, or get your results, sorry. And it was the first time that he'd seen people taking ecstasy. And Dan was complete chatterbox. He was the antithesis of the moody, monotone, monosyllabic teenage boy. And so he's going, Mum, you should have seen, they were so funny. They looked like this, and they were going around saying all this stuff. And so I did the, you just don't know what's in it. You don't know how strong it is. One pill can kill, Leah Betts, and that. I mean, in fact, with her, she drank too much water, because that was the harm reduction advice. But nevertheless, but we had that exact conversation of it could just be once. And Dan's death made us realise how many young people like Dan weren't getting the drug education that they needed for when those choices come around, because it's so difficult now to avoid coming across drugs, whether that's, now especially on social media, being in situations where you're facing a decision, but also just being exposed to people using drugs and a narrative around drugs. And how many films and dramas do you watch where someone's snorting coke, or, smoking weed? Of course, it's legal in many US states now, but there's a whole different visibility that drugs have, and a kind of normalization for some drugs in particular. And I wanted other young people to know what I wish Dan had known, and which might have got him home safely. And so we started a drug education charity. And I guess education is what I can do. If we wanted to start a fundraising charity, that would have fallen flat on its face in a couple of weeks, because I'm rubbish at that. But I do know about teaching and learning. I know about kind of working in partnership with schools, and I know about how important it is to start from an evidence base of what works, and how important it is to be measuring impact. There's a whole load of transferable knowledge that I had to a place where I didn't know a lot about working with teenagers, and I didn't know enough about drugs, and I knew nothing about drug education. But I'm good at learning, and I was super motivated, because it was just so enormously important to us as Dan's mum and dad to do everything we could.
We're going to blast all this everywhere, because I think what you're doing is amazing. And one of the reasons I wanted you on here is because I got to see you speak, and it was just so inspiring. And the person I saw in front of me was a brilliant human themselves. And I really wanted to know, okay, there must be a brilliant human, behind that. There always is. There's many brilliant humans, I'm sure. And so that's why I asked you onto the podcast, and you kindly agreed to come on and talk about someone very special to you. So Fiona, why don't you tell us, who is your brilliant human?
Well, as you say, I mean, there are many brilliant humans in my life. I'm very blessed. But I really want to talk about my mum, because honestly, without my mum, I wouldn't have been able to do that, picking myself up such as I did, in the complete wreck of a human being that I was when Dan died. But just that, my mum is she's a brilliant human. She doesn't think she is, and that's another aspect of her. In fact, she thinks the complete opposite. In fact, I was chatting to her this evening. I hadn't said anything about doing a podcast this evening, and I thought, I'm going to tell her. So, Mum, I'm doing this podcast about brilliant humans, and who do you think my brilliant human might be? And she said, oh, is it your dad? Who is also a brilliant human, by the way. I said, no, it's you, Mum. And she said, oh, no, that's made me feel really bad, because I am so not a brilliant human. I feel really terrible that you're talking.
We're going to make you feel really uncomfortable. What's her name, Fiona?
Angela Mabbs.
Angela, we're going to make you feel really uncomfortable now, because we're going to talk about why you're so brilliant, and we're going to celebrate it. So look, I mean, yeah, on a and we will celebrate Angela, of course. But I want to know about that. You mentioned something really poignant there, in the, because I was thinking about this earlier, knowing that you were talking about your mother. And it's for her at that time, one, she's just lost a grandchild, which is devastating in itself. But two, her daughter's going through a really tough time.
Mm.
So, talk to me about how did she pick you up, whilst obviously clearly having to work through her own grief?
Well, Mum and Dad, they just moved in. I mean, I was absolutely useless. We started a charity 8 days after Dan died. So we were registered with Companies House Charity. But I could not even work out what plate to get out of the cupboard, let alone cook a meal or anything. I couldn't, and I didn't care about, to be honest, a lot of stuff, like anything that sustained human existence just wasn't particularly important. And life was so, all of a sudden, completely crazy that we'd had the press knocking at the door first thing the next morning. We'd got police. We'd got a lovely family liaison officer, but I mean, there's a whole criminal justice process going on through that. We were, because it had got into every national paper 2 days after Dan died, everybody that I had ever known knew that Dan had died. And all these amazing, kind, generous, big-hearted, brave people just turned up at the house. So we had, like, some days literally standing room only. We're getting, well, you may not, you maybe have much tidier cupboards than me, but you keep the embarrassing mugs right at the back of the cupboard. All our embarrassing mugs were out with cups of tea. And Mum and Dad just, I mean, I can't say I even know everything that they were doing then, because I wasn't particularly, but we had, for example, the postman had to knock at the door because there were so many cards that came that he couldn't actually get them through the letterbox. So that went on for days. And I would open a card and then I just collapse. So Mum and Dad just shielded, or just dealt with that. And as you say, that was her. And she loved Dan. So, I mean, Dan, everyone loved Dan. And we were all there when he died. She'd watched that. She'd been there. And how awful it was and still is. And yet she put herself out, and as did my dad. And they were just here. They moved in for about 6 weeks. In the meantime, sold their house and bought a flat in Swanage where they live, which is amazing. So they popped home to I was incredible. And then,
and is she? And sorry to interrupt, but as Angela, has she always been like that? Has she always been sort of selfless?
Yeah.
And is that her background personality?
She is the kindest person that I know, and has always been very conscious of other people's needs, but not just their needs, but she's just very, very intuitively sensitive to what people need, and really puts other people's needs before her own. She's just an incredibly deeply caring person. I mean, I don't know if we'll come on to it, but the quality that I think I owe so much to her, or not, is bringing us up on Pollyanna. So that Pollyanna, do you know, you're looking confused? Pollyanna.
I am, yeah, because I don't know what this is, so I'm intrigued.
So kindness, I think, is a really massive legacy, and I'm just so grateful for her for that, but also for Pollyanna. So Pollyanna is a story that was written in the 30s, I think, about this it's a children's story about this orphan. Or she becomes an orphan.
Okay.
So she isn't at the beginning. It's just her and her dad, and they're very, very, there's lots of hardship, but her dad plays this game with her where they call the glad game. So they find something to be glad about. And then her dad dies and she's an orphan, and even more hardship. But she just plays this glad game in every situation. So there's always something to be glad about. And my mum brought us up on this principle. It used to be so annoying because you'd just be really cross about something. She'd go, okay, let's play the glad game. What is there in this that we can be glad about? What can we be thankful about? And the principle that there is always something, there's always good to be found in every situation. There's always something to be thankful for. There's always good in everybody. Sometimes you have to look a bit harder than other times. And that doesn't negate what's bad in that situation. But there is always something good to find if you look for it. And there is always something to be thankful for. It's absolutely right. And you find what you're looking for. You know, if you're going to look for, we were talking about this earlier, weren't we, negativity? If you're going to look for something bad, you can always find it, but you can also always find something good. And that was very much, and still is, you know, still absolutely is. She's had so many difficult things happening. I mean, all through her life, there've been some difficult things, but particularly in more recent years. I mean, 6 months after Dan died, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. So she was 80 then. And that was treated. And over the next 5 years, she was signed off. But she had to have surgery and chemo and so on. That then came back. Well, it was the 1st of January 2021, so 5 years ago. So she's now got, and it's on. So she's got metastatic breast cancer. That's spread. That's in her bone. So that then led to her having 5 major operations in the course of the last sort of 3.5 years. But every time she goes into hospital, I mean, they know her because she's been such a frequent flyer, but nurses come from other wards to come and give her a hug. Go, oh, Angela's back. She's just that sort of person. But even in those situations, she's straight away. That's the other thing I would say: kindness, thankfulness, but also picking yourself up. And thinking about there's so much that I can't do, but what can I do in this situation? What could I do? She'll be someone who is straight away, I mean, she was a physio, so that might help in terms of the exercise thing, but I was going to say she's straight away thinking, okay, I can't get very far, but I'm going to try to get to the door of the ward, and she'll do that and get back. Okay, so tomorrow, maybe I'll see if I can get to the chairs down the end of the, and so she's always got that instinct to try and do what she can to pick herself up and dust herself off and make the best out of where she is and try and make it better.
And that is something I've been thinking about in the last probably 18 months, is just the lens in which we look at life. And like you say, you know, there are, I mean, just, and you as well, Fiona. I mean, this is obviously, you know, you are obviously your mother's daughter, because it would be so easy, you know, focusing on Angela first, it would be so easy for her just, you know, 5 surgery, just give up. and be bitter and be twisted about life. Why me? Why is all this stuff happening to me? But she hasn't done that. She's still thinking about Pollyanna. And actually, when you said Pollyanna, I'm going to remember that for the rest of my life. But isn't that just because it's habit? I mean, do you think that's, if you practice gratitude,
Yes.
if you practice Pollyanna,
Yeah.
then it becomes a lot easier?
I absolutely do. And then I think you've got that as a default mode. So when something happens that is difficult, that can be your default.
You're listening to the Brilliant Humans podcast, where, here's the catch, no one is talking about themselves, only the brilliant human who has changed their life. If you've got someone you'd like to celebrate, drop us a note at brillianthumanspodcast@gmail.com.
So when Dan died, there was this, I know there is, I have been told there's such a thing as toxic positivity, and I think you have to be very careful about doing it for other people. But there was nevertheless, there was so much, there's still so much that I'm thankful for, despite that being the worst possible thing. There were so many things that we were blessed by in that. We were able to be with him. He could have been dead before we got to the hospital. I know other parents, I know so many parents now who've lost their children, and for some of them, they got the call and their child was already dead. He wasn't. We had 2 and a bit days. We might not have had that long. That was such a gift, that time. Just the fact that we had Dan, how amazing is that? We had Dan for 16 years and 7 months and 24 days. What a gift that was. We might not have had him at all, or he might not have been such an amazing, brilliant human himself.
Yeah.
I did want to keep talking about Dan because he was.
No,
he was
of course.
And he brought such a lot of love and life, and there is such a lot. And my goodness, what an amazing community of support we had around us. We knew that we'd got good friends, but what gold. We really had no idea. People there in the hospital bring jam sandwiches and flasks of tea, and just incredible. And then afterwards as well, picking us up, cooking us meals. We had more lasagna than we could keep in the fridge.
And it's funny you mentioned that, because I was sifting through notebooks the other day, organising the many notebooks I have, and I found a list. And someone used this expression, and I stole it because I loved it. And they're called foul weather friends. And I really like that.
Yeah.
And I found this list, and I have a list of foul weather friends. And I really, it reminded me to just tell them that I love them. And you're right. It's the people that, because we've nothing, absolutely nothing compared to what you've experienced. But we've had a couple of stays in hospital because Logan's snapped his femur, and when he was 3, and 4 weeks in hospital there, and then he had a thing called septic arthritis, and we were down in. But it was the lasagna crew. And it was the crew that and I heard Richard E. Grant talking about losing his wife to cancer, and he said a lot of people just don't know how to. Yes. They don't know what to say, or they don't know how to act. It makes them feel a bit awkward when someone close to them is experiencing loss. And he said, just don't ask. Just go round with a meal.
With the lasagna.
And put it in the fridge. And it's so true. If you've been through that situation where you're running around and you're trying to think about everything and everything's a bit hectic, it's those friends that just turn up with a lasagna. And it's the foul weather friends. It's the ones that then check in on you afterwards.
Yes.
And they're so special.
And I found it so humbling and inspiring myself, because I thought, I hope that I would be that for other people. So I do try really hard to be that foul weather friend myself as well, because I hope I would. And I was so conscious of how brave people are, because, turning up on the door of somebody whose child's died, that's a really brave thing to do, isn't it? And I was so grateful that people were brave enough to do that, and just show up.
It's the gratitude thing. Again, when Logan was in hospital, that's when Lauren and I started a gratitude diary. And what I noticed about that, and again, I then want to come back to your story, but what I noticed is that you started off thinking it'd be the big things. And then actually it just became the really little things that I was so grateful for. You know, that amazing cup of tea at the end of the night, or that little smile from the cleaner that I'd seen every day. And it was those tiny bits of human kindness that I suddenly
Yes.
became super grateful for. And it's like, oh my God, I wouldn't have even noticed them had I not been tuned into it and practiced that every single day, just writing something down. Um, but and you mentioned, I wanted to talk about Angela's job and vocation. So you mentioned she was a physio, so she even worked in a career that helped other people.
Yes. Yeah. So she was a physio, and then actually, latterly, sort of the last bit of her working life, I suppose. I mean, very latterly, she was an auxiliary, and as they moved down to Swanage, they hadn't quite retired, so she worked in the cottage hospital in Swanage. But in between, my dad was made redundant. He was a research chemist. He worked in industry, in the paint industry, and he was made redundant and wasn't able to find another job because it was really difficult then. There were so many people unemployed, and if you're over 35, you can, anyway. So they opened an old people's home, and it was this lovely vision of just having a big extended family in our house. So we moved house, this big house with room for 6 older people. And so mum and dad had got 3 teenagers and then these 6 old people, and mum did all the cooking from scratch. It was just this idea of having a big family, doing care in a different sort of way. And unfortunately, it nearly finished them off because it's not actually something that's viable to do without charging enormous fees, which of course they didn't. And so they didn't have any time off, and they just really burnt out. And then regulations made that sort of thing really difficult to do. So they sold up and moved down to Swanage and worked for
But
a few years.
even the act of wanting to do that is just
Yeah.
beautiful. Just that
Yeah.
selfless, kind, thinking of others. What an amazing thing. And I want to come back to the point where you said you started the charity, was it 8 days after Daniel passed?
Yes. Yeah.
Um, how did your mum, respond to that? Did she ever sort of go, whoa, Fiona, slow down? Or was she all in going, right, you do this and supportive? How did that look at the time?
Gosh, that's a good question. I can't remember. I can't imagine she wouldn't have been supportive. But I honestly don't remember specifically. I do remember, I mean, definitely Tim, Jacob and me, we were all, if we hadn't all been on the same page with it, we wouldn't have been able to do it.
And Tim is is
Tim's my
Daniel's
husband.
dad. Yeah.
Yeah, Ben's dad. And Jacob's his big brother. And Jacob's only 18. I mean, he turned 19 soon after Dan died, but he was just, he just started university. And so,
And I mean, I guess, all right. So you formed the foundation, and at the start, like you said, you didn't really know what it was going to be or what it was going to look like. How did your mum get involved then when you said, right, this is what we're doing?
well, I mean, they've done so many different things. I've got a lovely picture of my mum and dad. We used to give out little pin badges with the foundation logo. The logo has got kind of a design of Dan's face that some of his friends did. It's still got that on it. And I've got a picture of my mum and dad with a badge making machine sitting at our dining table, making this kind of this little cottage industry, making pin badges that we could give out to young people in schools. They've done so many different things and supported things that we've done in different ways. They're regular donors, but so they've been incredibly supportive and encouraging all the way through.
And I think, again, we were sort of speaking before. I think that generation, I think it's probably, drug taking for sort of 2 generations removed from Daniel. It just wasn't. From what I understand, it was very, very rare then.
Yeah,
I think it was sort of maybe our generation that really started to sort of not popularize it, but sort of get more access to it.
yeah,
And then it's Daniel's generation who are living in this crazy world where you can go on Facebook and, dare I say it, buy a bag of drugs as easily as you're ordering a pizza. So
Yeah,
I
and
guess for
not
Angela,
Facebook
and
if you're a teenager though, Jonathan, sorry, but
you're allowed on Facebook, aren't you?
I'm on Facebook. No, but most teenagers aren't on Facebook,
Oh,
just saying.
yes, you're right. I'm sorry. I was like, I know they've banned it in Australia, but I was like, they can still get on it. But you're so right. They don't use Facebook. That's what we use.
Anyway, sorry to
Snapchat and Instagram.
TikTok.
No, even TikTok. But you know what I
But
mean?
yes,
Like,
no, absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a generationally, it's quite a big thing to get your head around.
yeah.
This is
And
something
probably a much
and
more of a taboo as
yes,
well.
and yes, and I mean, we're committed Christians, so we in a church community, and my parents are as well. And I think in any faith community, people aren't supposed to use drugs. You know, it's not something that you should be doing. And that was something. I mean, because Mum and Dad love Dan so much and know Dan, and just there wasn't ever any judgment, but it was very difficult for them in terms of their peer group, their friends, and I mean they've got lovely friends, of course, and they had great, fantastic support in the community as well. But I think they felt that more than it would have. I wish they hadn't had to feel that. You know.
I know what you mean, but I mean, again, what I'm taking, listening to what you're saying is that although they felt maybe that embarrassment, judgment, they still showed up. They were still there making badges. They were still there, at the front line shouting about it. So again,
Absolutely.
what an amazing thing. Actually, they went.
My mum is she will talk to anyone about what we do. She was just saying there was an old people's. It was a gorgeous thing. The year 7 and 8, but I think they're mostly year 7s, did a Christmas tea for the old folk of Swanage, which was just such a lovely thing. They sang songs and made mince pies and did a little show and things. And Mum didn't actually. She was saying, I wanted to talk to the head teacher and say, you really need to get Fiona talking. You need to get the Daniel Spargo-Mabbs Foundation in the school. She's ordered copies of my book in the bookshop in Swanage, so that they've got them on the shelves, and B, so that she can then give them to various people. So I've given so a copy of your book.
That's amazing.
So yeah, that she's got her eye on it all the time. We need to get
even at 92, even with everything that she's got going on as well.
Yeah.
I mean, Fiona, you talked about how she's you talked about the impact she's had on you. Clearly, the gratitude and the kindness and the seeing the good in all the situations. What do you think the biggest lesson that other people can take from your mum?
From my mum, there is always good in everything. There's always something to be thankful for. That's such a useful habit of mind, maybe. I don't know if that's the right phrase, but it is so true. There is no situation you can be in that isn't that where there's nothing so. I mean, we talk about this in terms of the foundation and what happened to Dan. There's nothing so bad that it can't grow something good, and I think that's the whole baggage of there's always good in every situation. There's always good in every person. There's always something to be thankful for. There's nothing that's so bad that there can't be some good that can come from it. And that's my mom.
And the reason I have a reaction to that is I think anyone listening, I mean, it's just incredible, and you're incredible, honestly. And I think anyone listening that has got children, I know my wife will listen to this, and at that point, she will just go, I just can't believe it. If I lost, my son, I just can't imagine there being any good to come from it. But you've actually shown that, like you say, you would give it all up. You would give the OBEs up and the award winners and the book and stuff like that. You would give it all up in a nanosecond, to have Daniel back. But you've shown that it's actually true. And I think without that lived experience, it's quite difficult to hear that any situation can come from it. But I think you're proof of that.
Also, but kind of selfishly as well. I think it helps me enormously to know that this something so awful can grow something good. Otherwise, what is there other than this awful thing? You know, if that awful thing can make a difference in the lives of other people in a really positive way, if it can be something that becomes a force for good, and can bring change, and the story itself is something that, and because Dan was Dan as well. I mean, that's the thing. If Dan wasn't Dan, then this wouldn't have worked quite as well as it seems to
And
have
how many?
done.
I mean, do you have any estimate on how many young people you've
Gosh, I
been?
should have that number
I
in
mean,
my
it's
head.
hundreds of thousands, surely.
It is hundreds of thousands over the years. Yeah.
Which is incredible, and I love the fact. I love the fact that Dan's name is in the name of the foundation as well, because he's living on through the great work that you're doing, which is ultimately, you've had that mindset, even though the worst thing that could have ever happened to you happened. You've had that mindset because of your mum and dad.
Mm.
And I think we take it so for granted, don't we? That we're the sum of the parts that we grew up with, and
Yes.
maybe we
Yeah.
just don't think about that sometimes. And actually, it's worth stopping and going, oh. We kind of moan about turning into our parents, don't we? We moan. I do. I mean, I sort of get up out of a chair and make a noise. I recognise that that's what my dad used to do, and I'm like, what's that about? But actually, maybe I should think about all the good things that we've inherited from them. And I think you've made me
Yeah.
really think about that today.
Yeah, not just the dodgy eyes and the wonky nose or whatever. But no, yeah, it is. I was so. If anyone ever says you're so like your mum, I feel so. I think I couldn't ask for a higher praise. Really, I would love to be someone that's loved as much as my mum, and has made a difference in so many people's lives just by being herself.
And the world needs more people like Angela and like you, Fiona. I really mean that. And again, I was so inspired when I saw you speaking. It was just a no-brainer to ask you to come on today. And we always finish with the same question. So, Angela's listening. What would you like to say to your brilliant, brilliant mum?
Oh gosh, this is the point where I'm going to. I would say just, I love you so much, Mum, and thank you so much for being you. And what I would say is, whatever you think about yourself, there is a very long list of people that think you're a brilliant human, because you are. And I'm so proud to be your daughter. I'm so grateful.
There we go. And I'm really grateful that you come on, because what I love about this show is that I get to hear and celebrate people that I have no right to have ever met. It's very unlikely that I would meet your mum, sadly. But actually, now I know about her and I get to celebrate her, and I'm going to go and look for Pollyanna, and I'm going to think about, what would Angela do? Like, I really will. And so thank you so much for coming on and sharing her with us, Fiona. And look, how can people find the foundation? How can people get involved if they want to learn more?
So we've got a website, www.dsmfoundation.org.uk. So DSM as in Daniel Spargo-Mabbs. So have a look there. People can contact us via the website. We've got absolutely masses of resources on there for parents, for young people, for professionals working with young people. There's loads of information about what we do. So do have a look on there. We've got socials going on as well. So you can have a look on LinkedIn or Facebook or Instagram. But no, do look out and do get in touch if anything would be useful that we do, or if you want to find out more about anything.
Yeah. And like you say, it starts with it doesn't have to wait to go into schools. You can, as parents, you can have those conversations, and you can just educate kids. And even as young as 7, we were talking about the difference, because aren't drugs something that the doctor gives you? Well, yes, but there's bad drugs as well. And it starts at home. But look, we'll share all of that. We'll share on the socials. We'll make sure we're spreading the news about what you're up to. And just again, thank you so much for what you're doing, because it would have been really easy for you to curl up into a ball, be bitter with the world, and just never do any of this stuff. But actually, you turn this into something remarkable. So thank you.
Thank you so much. That's really kind of you. Thank you.
Well, look, Fiona, I hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for coming on. Yes, and thank you again, Angela. You are one inspiring woman. So thanks, Fiona.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Brilliant Humans podcast. If you've got a brilliant human you'd like to celebrate, then email us at brillianthumanspodcast@gmail.com to find out how to share their story. Or if you've got someone you'd simply like to thank, why not tell them now? It might just make their day. And if you've enjoyed this episode, please don't forget to follow, like, or leave us a comment. It really helps more people discover these brilliant stories. See you next time.